In this quick session, I will answer what, why, and how of Linux. Let's start with what is Linux. Linux is an operating system. Just like any other operating system, Linux distribution is a bundle of its core part known as kernel and many other applications like spreadsheet and video player. An operating system is that software package which manages hardware and provides services to the other applications. In other words, operating system act as a mediator between software applications and the hardware. To understand this, assume we have a text editor which can print our text files after content creation. Once content creation task is completed, this application hand over the printing task. OS communicates to the device driver and sends the right signal to the printer. The text editor application doesn't have to care about how the printer works. It is all handled by OS. So, Linux is the operating system which acts as the interface between hardware and different applications. Second question, why Linux? First and most importantly, Linux is an open source operating system. It means this OS is freely available to use, modify, and contribute. We can use Linux kernel and build our own custom OS on top of it. Linux is available in many distributions with common core part, which is Linux kernel. These distributions are different in applications and UI. Apart from client OS, Linux is also available as a server operating system. Linux is highly secure, which makes it a very strong candidate for server OS. Along with free version, commercial and paid versions of Linux servers are also available, like SUSE and Red Hat. Now final question, how to work with Linux? Linux can be used with both GUI and non-GUI mode. Its distribution like Ubuntu is a very famous OS. However, if you want to work with any distribution which doesn't support GUI, then we need to know its basic commands and their flow. For better performance, most of the Linux servers are non-GUI, which generates requirement of learning Linux fundamentals and its commands. Linux allows us to develop our own program by using shell scripting. These scripts can be used to automate different repetitive tasks to save manual effort. In this course, we will learn the fundamentals of Linux and shell scripting. We will see the most useful commands and their documentation. We will also learn shell scripting to create our custom programs. So why are we waiting for? Let's start learning this simple yet powerful operating system. Welcome to the world of Linux. For making our life smooth and straightforward, we have divided this course into two different parts. In the first part, we will see Linux fundamentals and its commands, while in second, we will see how to work with shell scripts. However, before that, let's see our learning objectives. This course assumes no prior programming and Linux experience. So our motive is to make a person fundamentally strong on Linux and shell scripting. So after completion of this course, you will be able to first install and run any distribution of Linux in your machine. Second, work with the most useful Linux commands and know their important use cases. Third, communicate to any Linux server via shell. And fourth, create shell scripts which will help you to automate repetitive tasks. Now it's time to see different sessions under this course. We will start this course with the installation of virtual machine and Linux. Then, we will start our journey with the introduction of Linux. After the introduction, the next session will be on understanding command documentation and flow. We will also cover some basic commands in this session. The next session will be on exploring Linux directories and file systems. After this, there will be a session on redirections. Security is an essential feature of Linux. Hence, we will learn different file permissions and their modifications. The next session will be on learning some commands related to networking and server communication. Finally, we will see how to install different packages in Linux and manage different processes. Now at this point, first part will be completed and it's time to start second one. The second part of this course is all about shell scripting. We will start the second part with shell introduction and hello world program. The next session will be on if-else structure and its different syntaxes. After if-else, we will see how other basic construct works, like different loops, switch case, break and continue statements. We will use all these basic constructs in functions, which defines modularity and reusability of a program. Finally, there will be a session on combining all these fundamental concepts to build a simple hotel-like application. That will be end of our second part. Since Linux contains a vast number of commands, we will complete our course by explaining and summarizing 30 most useful commands. So this will be our journey of learning Linux. At the end of this course, there will be mind map which will help us to retain our concepts and revise them in future. Now it's time to start our Linux journey. In this session, we are going to see how to use a virtual machine to install any Linux distribution for our learning purpose. Also, for the practical examples, we need a Linux OS.
But, I already have a Linux operating system, do I still need to install this VM?
If you have any Linux OS or Mac OS, then you don't need to install VM. However, if you have Windows, then instead of replacing it, you can use virtual machine to work on both Windows and Ubuntu. I am right now on Mac, but still, for demonstration purpose, this entire course will be on Ubuntu. Sometime I will switch from VM to Mac if required by the example. So let's start with a quick description of what are virtual machines and how they work. A virtual machine or VM is nothing but the isolated virtual computers which can run on any single physical machines known as host. These VMs are completely isolated to each other and cannot affect other VM or host machine. By using virtual machines, we can try and test multiple operating systems on a single host without losing any data or security. Assume you have a single host machine with Windows OS. Now you want to try an application or test some application on any other version of Windows or other OS like Linux. For this, you can create multiple VMs in your host machine and then run any application as per your need. There is a thin layer of software called hypervisor, which segregates host with VM. This hypervisor is responsible for resource distribution and host VM communication. Now, if you want to run multiple VMs on your host, then you need some management software which will manage all VMs from a single point. This software package is generally known as virtualization package. One of this package is Virtualbox by Oracle. So in this course, to set multiple virtual machines, we are going to use first host machine, which is Mac in my case, second Virtualbox, and third Ubuntu OS, which is the most common Linux distribution package for users. So let's start the installation of these packages. First step is to download Virtualbox. So I'm going to Google and type download Virtualbox. Now open Oracle VM Virtualbox, and here depending on your platform, you can download any one of these packages. In my case, this is OS X host, so if you click over it, it will start downloading Virtualbox. So I am cancelling it out because I already have it. Once you download this Virtualbox, you have to install just like any other software. Install it with the default locations and all settings. Once the installation is completed, open Virtualbox and create a new machine. Now I am going to show how to create a virtual machine. Just click over New button and provide the name of your virtual machine. In my case, this will be my Ubuntu 2 because I already have an Ubuntu machine, therefore I'm going to delete after demonstration. So type you can choose as Linux because we have multiple options here. It can be Windows, Solaris, IBM, Mac, any other. But in our case, we need to choose Linux. And in version drop down, you can choose any distribution. You can find out a lot of distribution here. But The most common distribution is Ubuntu. You should also know what is the bit configuration of your processor. It can be 32-bit or 64-bit. In my case, it's 64-bit. Now click over Continue. Here, this is the recommended memory size, which is your RAM. You can increase or decrease. I am putting it default. Click on Continue again. And here it will prompt for to create a virtual hard disk. Now click over the Create button, dynamically allocated. Then click over Continue. You can put any name for your virtual machine. I am giving my Ubuntu 2 because I am going to delete it after demonstration. Now click over Create. As you can see, a new virtual machine, my Ubuntu 2, has been created with all these configurations. Now we are all set with our virtual machine. Now it's time to download Linux Ubuntu distribution. Again, go to Google and search for download Ubuntu. Open ubuntu.com page. Now here you can click on download button. Depending on your OS, it will start downloading the ISO file. Once downloading is completed, you will find ISO file like this. We need this installation file for our installation purpose. Now I'm going to start installation of Ubuntu on my virtual machine. So select your current virtual machine on which you want to do installation and click over Start. Once you start, it will ask for the image file or ISO image file. Select the location where you have stored your Ubuntu ISO file. Select it and click on Open. Now click over Start button. Now Virtualbox is now started and it will start installation of Ubuntu on this VM. Once boot process is completed, it will ask you to try Ubuntu or to install Ubuntu. But here we want to install Ubuntu, so click over Install button and then it will start installation process. And now instead of normal installation, I am going for minimal installation. Also, I am not taking the option to download updates during installation. Now click on Continue. This is the final screen in which it will give you a message that it will erase all data on your virtual disk. Here, don't fear, any of your data is going to erase. It is going to perform operation on the newly created virtual disk, not on our actual hard disk. So click over Install Now. And after this, it is going to install Ubuntu on your virtual machine. Remember, all the tasks that we are doing here is not affecting our host OS. Thereby, feel free to do any experiment if you want. If you think there is a problem, then delete it and create a new one. Now finally, Ubuntu OS is installed on our VM. Now I'm going to start it. So select your VM and click on Start button. Here it will start the VM and boot up our Ubuntu OS. Finally, I am running an Linux operating system on my Mac operating system using VM. So I have both the operating system and I can do an experiment with this Linux without losing any data on my host machine. So that's enough for this session. We have learned how to install Virtualbox and Ubuntu on our host machine. In the next session, we are going to learn Introduction to Linux. In this session is all about actual meaning of Linux commands and how you can find their references and helps. Let's start with the question answer round. In this round, I am going to ask some fundamental questions. Try to give their answers. Right or wrong doesn't matter. Let's start with the most basic question. What is the meaning of command in plain English?
In plain English, I think it means order or instruction.
Okay. So what do you think to whom we are giving instructions or orders when we run a software application?
I think we are instructing a computer.
What part of computer accepts instructions?
It's the CPU or processor.
Nice. It's the processor to whom we give commands. But as far as I know, the processor understands only machine language. And we are giving commands in plain English. So how it understands our commands?
In that case, there must be some mediator. This should convert our English-like commands into machine language.
That's perfect. This is what I want to hear. There must be something between command we type in command line and its execution. But what's the meaning of execution of a command?
The literal meaning of execution is like doing something. So execution of command should be like doing something which is written inside command.
Yeah, you almost got it. And thanks for answering those questions. Let me explain the actual flow of command execution in Linux. Assume this is us, human being, and this is the hardware or machine. We want to give our instruction to this machine. The language we understand is English, and the language machine understands is machine language, which is nothing but in the form of 0 and 1. We cannot communicate in machine language, so we need something which can convert our language in machine language. So here comes the operating system, which is Linux in our case. Now the most lower part of the OS is its kernel, which is communicating with the machine. Now to take instructions from human being, OS provides two modes. First, from UI, which is like clicking on some buttons, and second, from the command line, which is all text based. Let's forget about UI at this time and focus only on the command line. Now to accept text-based commands from the user, Linux provides a software program which is called shell. Shell is a program which calls another program. Its primary purpose is to interpret user's input and call the required program. In Linux, everything is a file. Let me repeat this statement, as we need to remember it throughout our Linux career. In Linux, everything is a file. Whenever we execute a command, we call a file which contains all necessary instructions for execution in binary format. Shell program finds out the actual file which is being referred by the command itself. Now commands in Linux can be divided into two categories. First, built-in command, and second, external command. A built-in command is that command which comes out of the box with shell, and an external command is that which is not available inside shell. Now as I said, everything is a file in Linux, so shell uses a simple mechanism to search the file or command. It starts its searching first in built-in. If not, then it searches the same command in all directories defined in the path variable. We will talk about the path variable in later section, but let's focus on the flow of command at this moment. So shell always searches in built-in first and then all directories mentioned in the path variable. If it is not able to find the command in any of this location, then it returns the error command not found. It calls a function known as fork, which creates the copy of shell itself and then replace it with the program which is being executing. The new process is now called a child process. The process from which it is created is called a parent process. Now once the execution of the child process gets completed, it returns the result to the parent process and terminates itself. The parent shell shows the result to the user and again ready to accept any other command. Let's take a simple example of this. Now open your VM and open Ubuntu. Click over the Show Application button and I'm going to start terminal. Once you start terminal, just write down any gibberish command and hit enter. Now you can see the result command sdfk not found, which means the shell is trying to find out this command in first built-in and then in path variable, but there is no file with name sdkf, so it returned the result command not found. Now I'm going to run another command with name ls, which is the short form of list. So type ls and hit enter. In response, we can see it has shown the result of folders and files which are available in current directory. Don't worry about directories and all, we will cover them in upcoming sessions. But before we start how command works in Linux, we should know how to see its references, because it will help us in knowing what are those commands and what are the different options available. In order to see any documentation of any command, we have to use man command, which simply means manual. If you want to see the manual of any command, just run man and the name of the command whose documentation you want to see. So I am going to see the documentation of ls command. Man ls and hit enter. Now you found the documentation of this ls command. In very beginning you will find yourself difficulty in understanding this documentation. So I am going to start Command standard format is divided into 4 parts. First, its meaning. Second, synopsis. Third, description. And then command options. Finally, any other command related to this command. So before coming to the command, let's understand the syntax of reading manual of a command. Among all these descriptions and explanation, we are more concerned about how quickly we can read a synopsis. A synopsis gives you entire thing in just 1 or 2 lines. A synopsis is generally written in the format of utility name, which is ls, and then square brackets and lot of options inside it. If you don't know the meaning of these characters, it will scare you a lot. So let's decipher it first to find out what it tries to tell us. All command synopsis starts with the command name, which we need to use whenever we want to use it. Second is options. Commands must have a way to accept options from the user. Now, short option name started with hyphen character and long option name starts with double hyphen character. It is possible to have a short option with a similar long option, but the reverse is not true, which means if we have a long option name, we cannot use it as a short option name. When an option is wrapped inside a square bracket, it means the option is optional, it's not mandatory. If we don't provide any option, the command still works. However, if there is no square bracket, that it means the option is mandatory and we have to provide it, otherwise the command will not work. It is sometimes possible that an option requires some option arguments. If there are some option arguments, then it is mentioned just right after the option character, separated by a space character. Just like options, the option argument can be mandatory or optional. If it is optional, then it will appear inside the square bracket, otherwise without the square bracket. Once all options are completed, then there are operands. Just like options, operand can also be mandatory or optional. And again, if it is optional, it will be inside a square bracket. Sometimes multiple options are allowed for the same type. This is represented by ellipsis, means 3 dots. Let's use all of the above syntax meaning to find out meaning of synopsis of most common command, which is make directory or mkdir. So let me open mkdir, man, which means manual of mkdir, make directory. Hit enter. Now you can find out mkdir, which make directories. Now from synopsis, this is the command name and we have an option with 3 dots, which means we can provide different options of same type, and a mandatory operand, which means a directory is required in order to use it. Let's decipher it. The name is mkdir. It can accept 2 optional arguments. Since it is followed by 3 dots, it means we can pass any number of directories with this command, and it will create all of them at once. So if you know how to read synopsis, you can easily decipher what the command do. And we have documentation of all commands available in Linux. Once you complete reading of your manual, then you can just press Q button to quit from this documentation page. Okay, let me check your understanding of concepts which we just learned. Assume you need to create a synopsis of a command whose requirement I'm going to write here. So assume there is an utility which will find out the name of the movies from our local database. It will take some options and operands, and depending upon them, it will give either the name of the movie or error as movie not found. So the mandatory operand is director name. If you provide the director name, it will list down all the available movies of that director. To narrow down our search, we have some options which are: first, year with the mandatory argument as the year. Second, cast name with the mandatory argument of cast name, which can be of any number. That's all. So try to create synopsis for this utility.
Oh, it's pretty simple. The name of the command should be movie.
Okay, what's next?
Next should be the options, inside the square brackets. Like year, cast name with ellipses.
Perfect. Okay, last one. What should be the operand?
Operand should be mandatory director name.
That's good. So the synopsis will be like movies, then inside square bracket year, which is have description as year, then again square bracket cast name followed by 3 dots, which means we can provide any number of cast name, and then finally mandatory operand with name director. So this is how a command synopsis is written in Linux. So that's enough for this session. We have seen how command works in Linux and how to read manual of any command for our future reference. In upcoming session, we will start with learning some useful commands.